Have you ever heard of mast cell activation syndrome? And is it actually the missing piece to understanding your health? This is one of the many topics that we're going to discuss today. Today, I have with me Dr. Kelly McCann, who is a trailblazer in functional, integrative, and environmental medicine. She specializes in uncovering the true root cause of complex chronic conditions like mast cell activation syndrome, mold toxicity, and persistent infections. Her approach blends advanced diagnostics with decades of experience and intuitive insight so that she can treat not just your symptoms, but get to the soul level origins of illness. After navigating her own health crisis, which included mold exposure and Lyme disease, Dr. Kelly McCann discovered how deeply our emotions, our thoughts, and environment shape our biology. Dr. McCann, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Carol. I'm very happy to be here.
I want to dive a little bit into your backstory and brought you here. But first, I want to start with a question. What exactly is mast cell activation syndrome and why is it exploding? Why are we seeing more of this today?
Yes, let me tell you about mast cell because you're right, it is exploding, and people really need to understand this because it tends to show up in unusual ways in a variety of different people. But let's back up. So, mast cells are part of our immune system, and their job is to identify and sound the alarm when they see a foreign invader. And that foreign invader could be a virus, a bacteria, a toxin. And what they do is that they're filled with all these chemical messengers that we call mediators. And when they perceive a threat of any sort, they will release these mediators into the local environment. And those are things like cytokines and chemokines, histamine, heparin, and a whole bunch of inflammatory mediators. And those mediators then call to the rest of the immune system, hey guys, we have a problem over here. Come and help deal with this. And we want these mast cells to work. We want this to happen, right? When a lot of people were first getting sick with COVID, and COVID was very severe in the initial outbreak, people were in the hospital and you heard the term cytokine storm a lot. And that's exactly what was driving the cytokine storm was these mast cells dumping all their inflammatory mediators because COVID was a new virus and our immune systems hadn't been used to seeing something like that. Um, so what's happening now is that sometimes the mast cells get turned on and they're not turning off. And so it's an overactivation, a hypersensitivity syndrome. And I think in large part, this is happening for a variety of different reasons. One, there are immense amount of chemical toxicants in the environment, hundreds of thousands of chemicals that we're being exposed to on a regular basis. And this is far more than ever before on the planet that we know of. Um, there is an overabundance of viruses. We still see COVID on a regular basis, even though it might not look exactly the same. Um, there are other bacteria, things like Lyme disease. And I'm also finding that the mold in water damaged buildings is just exploding everywhere. And of course, I live in California where we don't really know how to build because it's sunny and 70 all the time, right? So we don't have to build very well constructed homes that are going to deal with 20 below weather or snow on the roof or anything like that. And so the houses themselves are not well built. And that means that you might have a leaky sliding glass door, a leaky window, a leaky roof, or there's a plumbing problem. And so there are leaks in the plumbing. And then we build with we build with wood and paper, which is fuel for mold. So there's a variety of different things that are happening. And The interesting thing is there is a syndrome called multiple chemical sensitivity, which
Mm.
is very similar to mast cell activation. But it was these outliers. These were canaries in the coal mine in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where people might have been exposed to a big dose of pesticides, or they got a big dose of some sort of other chemical like a solvent. And these chemicals triggered a condition called multiple chemical sensitivity. We didn't know the pathophysiology at the time. I suspect that they all had mast cell activation, and these were sensitive people. Fast forward, 50 years, and now because of all the chemicals, because of all the mold and the infections, more and more people have a burden of exposures that their mast cells just can't ignore.
Really interesting, because this is really the first time I've heard about this. It's not something that I think people are considering or thinking about. Now, this may sound like an odd question, but we see this explosion of autoimmune diseases such as RA, Crohn's. I mean, I think there's 100 different ones, 100 plus, probably more than that. Is there a link to the mast cell activation syndrome?
Indirectly, yes. They're all immune system problems, right? So the immune system is getting hijacked. With an autoimmune condition, the hijack is the toxin, the infection is triggering the immune system to misperceive the self as other, right? So the body's immune system sees our tissues as foreign and attacks us. The difference is that the toxin might be attaching to the tissues. So, for example, the thyroid gland and Hashimoto's is very susceptible to a wide variety of different chemicals, including mercury, perchlorate, um, trichloroethylene. So, trichloroethylene is used in dry cleaning. Perchlorate is used; it's part of like airplane fuel, and and mercury is in fish, and it's in amalgams, and so these different chemicals can actually attach to the tissues, and then when the immune system is looking for foreign invaders, it will misperceive this conglomerate of mercury plus some tissue, and so then it will start this autoimmune attack. So these mast cell activation, autoimmune issues, allergies, these are all immune dysregulation syndromes. And it's very common to see mast cell activation, allergy symptoms, and autoimmunity in the same person.
That's interesting. I've had allergies my entire life. I was diagnosed with autoimmune about 10 years ago, RA. So you kind of hit on something here. I want to park here with the allergies for a second. So let's say somebody, because I was told, oh, you were born with these, because I had them from day one. I was reactive to everything in my environment. Can you dive into this link a little bit more? Is this something, or is it coming through the mom? Or are we being exposed in the womb? What is happening there with allergies?
Yes, it is really the mom's environmental burden. So think about the body as like a sink, right? And some people have really big sinks and really big drains, and they can tolerate all sorts of things because their detox pathways work. They can get rid of them, they can process them, and they can handle a lot more. And then there are people who have very shallow sinks and really narrow drains, right? And and then it depends on the person's exposures. I see. Where are you from, Carol?
I was born in San Diego, California, or actually, I was
Okay.
born in Redlands, California. Grew up in San Diego.
Okay. So yeah, unfortunately, California is pretty toxic. Lots of problems here. Leaded gas, lead in paint, and then There's all sorts of problems on military bases in San Diego and things like that. So it really depends on what mom's exposures have been. I have a lot of patients from the Midwest. Their moms lived on farms where they used commercially available fertilizers and lots of pesticides and insecticides, and they're pretty sick. They're
Hmm.
pretty sick. So what mom has in her body when the baby is born, many of those environmental chemicals get passed through the placenta to the baby, and so the baby starts not like with a partially full bucket, and then add a few more things, and the bucket overflows. And you know, I will also say it's more than just the physical bucket. It's the emotional, psychological, and spiritual bucket too. So, if somebody grows up in a house where there's trauma, where there's abuse, if they have a perception that they weren't wanted, there's neglect there. These are very, very stressful to the the nervous system, to the immune system. And so many people who have mast cell activation, who have autoimmune conditions, will have some amount of trauma in their lives. Not everybody, but you can have little t traumas that are just as devastating to your psyche and to your nervous system than big T traumas. And these things are set up. I think resilience and teaching our children, our grandchildren resilience is really about like how can you navigate in the world. And what happens is that these days we have a whole variety of environmental chemicals and misbeliefs, misperceptions about ourselves. We may not think that we're worthy. We're people pleasers, and those traits are dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional. And so the immune system and the nervous system is getting reinforced not only by the environmental chemicals, but by the thoughts that we think, the things that we tell ourselves, our emotional dysregulation that set us up to be more susceptible. The way that I think about it is your immune system is your boundaries, right? That's the
Mm.
part of our body that says, this is me, this is not me, this is my stuff, this is not my stuff. And if we're not clear emotionally and psychologically about what's our stuff and what's not, how can our immune system be clear about what's our stuff and what's not?
I love how you describe that because I think of the immune system like the gatekeeper, like, what goes out, what comes in, how we react. And I have heard about this link between trauma, autoimmune, the immune system. And you think about it, it makes sense because you've got many people say, okay, autoimmune begins in the gut, but then the gut has that connection to the brain. So it is so interconnected.
It really is. We have this idea in Western culture that the mind, the spirit, the will is supreme, and the body is just like this, vehicle that we move our brain and our will around in. You know, it's really, it's really laughable when we think about it. But
It is.
our, you know, our will, our energy force enlivens every single cell of the body, right? It really does. And so, what we think, how we feel about ourselves matters. It matters probably more than anything. It matters more than the environmental chemicals. The environmental chemicals are just kind of riding the wave of the perceptions that we have about ourselves. I
Mm.
mean, I'm not saying that our thoughts are supreme either. It's really like we are so interconnected at the cellular level. with our physical biochemical bodies and our thoughts, emotions, spirit. We can't separate the two. And Western medicine follows along with the pathways of Western philosophy, that they're separate. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." Plato was all about, overcoming the mind, the overcoming the body, right? And as long as we have this dichotomy of mind is and will are supreme, and the body is something to be conquered, things aren't going to work quite right.
I could not agree more. And I think seeing how our world is now, there's definitely this disconnect. And I think people feel it because we are treating the mind like it's this separate entity over here and the body's over here, and they're interconnected. And, the spiritual, all of that, I believe, is interconnected. And so then you get this sense of disconnect, like feeling not really in sync with your body. And I've had that feeling before where it does. It feels like it's not congruent. It's not, you're not acknowledging the mind. And like you said, it's not that the thoughts are supreme. It's just that all of it has a role in this, a balance in this.
Yes. In fact, what I've started realizing, seeing patients over the years with complex chronic illness, is that people heal when we start to work on not just calming down the mast cells and calming down the immune system, although I have to do that when people are coming in and they feel terrible, right? And then I have to help them regulate their nervous systems, because the nervous system is stuck in fight or flight all the time. But once we get sort of on board with those ideas, then the people who really heal are the ones who recognize that the spirit that's inside is probably the most important piece of who we are. Like, this is our true essence, right? Our connection to the divine, however you think about it. When that part is being honored and we are living, our unique talents, purpose on this planet, everything else falls into alignment. When we're not, when we're dismissing ourselves, when we're dismissing our guts, our intuition, and we're just kind of setting that aside, that's when things start to go wrong. That's when the symptoms show up. And in fact, I've started to think about the symptoms as the kind of the check engine lights, right? They're the guideposts that keep us on track. And so I don't know if you've ever been in one of those like driver assist cars. I had one a few years ago, and every time I would start to like go off, the whole wheel would shimmy. Oh my goodness!
Yes, I know it shakes.
It shakes. You're like, oh my goodness. And then if you do it enough, I would get a little like coffee cup light that would show up and say, "Is it time to take a rest?"
That's funny.
It was so cute. I'm like, oh, that's adorable. Let me see that happen again. No. So, but here we are living our lives. We have our purpose. We have our drive, right? What is it that we love? We love the things that we're passionate about, and that's part of our purpose on the planet. And when we ignore that, we run into the barriers. We run into the sideposts, the bumper lanes, as you will. And then if we keep doing that, the body starts showing us symptoms. Hey, you're off track. You keep, doing this, and you need to go this way. And the more we ignore, the louder the symptoms get.
I was thinking as you were speaking, I'm wondering this connection to being a midlife woman, okay, going through perimenopause, menopause. That's when I that's when kind of my check engine lights were coming on, like, okay, something's going on here. And you talk about, finding your greater purpose. I feel like that's a juncture of life. I don't like to use the term midlife crisis, like what they used to talk about with men. Okay, go get the sports car, the younger wife, and all of the things. But it is, in a sense, it's like not a crisis, but it's this reevaluation that occurs in midlife. And you wonder how much the changes of perimenopause, menopause kind of play into this whole thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that yeah, I mean, it's all about this disconnect, right? So say there are some women that just fly through menopause and they don't have any issues, right? They're fewer and far between these days,
They
but
are.
how how are they with themselves going through this process? Are they okay with it? Have they, do they feel complete and satisfied with how they're living their lives so far? Or do they feel really disconnected, like really unsatisfied with how they've been taking care of themselves um, and whether or not they're really living their purpose or living their kids' purposes? I know a lot of women really suffer and struggle with, I want to be the best mom ever. I want to be the best um, daughter, take care of the parents. It's a challenging time for a lot of people. But I do think the the ones who have more challenges, it's partly because of that underlying dissatisfaction of really not being in alignment with your purpose. Because your purpose may be more than being a mom or being a daughter or taking care of everybody else, right? Taking care of everybody else is not most people's purpose.
Yeah,
um, it, it,
it's very true. Yeah, and women are typically the caretakers in the household.
right. So we have these defined roles, and then we come in as spiritual beings having a human experience. And what we're supposed to do here may be, in part that. I'm not saying that, but like, I feel really driven to share this message with women in particular, but all people who are going to listen, that, you're here for a reason. And that reason is deeply embedded in you. That is that spark. That is that fire. That is that passion. When you find yourself in flow, you're on the right track, right? And there are so many rules of society that we have taken on as, this is how I'm supposed to be. This is who I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to live, the things I'm supposed to do, all of that. And we have been ignoring and forgetting, who we were as 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and what
Yeah.
really lit us up when we were little kids, right? Maybe somebody
Mm.
wanted to be a dancer. Maybe somebody wanted to be an artist, and life just let that dream get forgotten.
Mm. That's why midlife is such a great time and menopause such a great time, because it clears some space. Once your kids, you're kind of getting to that empty nest if you had kids. Career, maybe you're at a juncture right there where, okay, am I retiring? What am I doing? And it clears up some space, I think, to really go back to what lit me up. I know I experienced this recently too, returning to writing, because that was my thing as a kid. Like, I want to be a writer. I want to be a writer. I want to write a book. I would make little books and sell them in the neighborhood. And then that gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're raising kids. Then you're doing some other career that has nothing to do with writing. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, why not? Let's go back and look at this. And it does. It brings a lot of joy. And so I love that you hit on this. Now, kind of circling back to your story, what brought you here to be talking to me about the things that we're discussing today?
Let's see, my story. So I had no idea I wanted to be a physician. I was a music major. I loved to sing, and that's what I did in college. And then realized, okay, no, I don't want to be an opera singer. I don't want to sing this beautiful repertoire written by dead white men from a long time ago. That is not my driving passion. Nope, that's not it.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, veer off. What do I like? What's giving me passion? And I thought I liked the mind and the brain and how it worked. So I got a master's in library science. Okay, that wasn't quite right. I'm going to go to medical school. Um, and so I went to medical school, but I always wanted to do more holistic medicine. I really wanted to go to acupuncture school. I had a mentor, a meditation mentor who was an acupuncturist, and I felt so much more passionate about treating people holistically and seeing the body in a really different way. Um, and then my parents said to me, "Oh, well, Kelly, you should really think about going to medical school." And I'm like, okay. So I made a deal with myself that if I got into medical school, I would go. And if I didn't, hallelujah, I'd go to acupuncture school. Gosh darn it, Carol, I got into 4 medical schools. So, all right, I had to, keep that deal with myself, went to medical school, and, and then really tried to learn as much as I could about holistic medicine. That's what we called it at the time. I did Reiki classes and studied massage and all through medical school. And then I also found a fellowship. I'm sorry, a residency program that was supportive. So I spent some time with an acupuncturist. So I did all these things to really try and flesh out my understanding as broadly as possible about the mind, the body, medicine, and then more holistic alternative forms of medicine. Fast forward, spent some time with Dr. Andrew Weil in the integrative medicine program at the University of Arizona. Did functional medicine, then in order to keep helping the more sick patients who kept showing up at my door, I did a fellowship in environmental medicine, and then I learned about mold and mold toxicity from Dr. Richie Shoemaker, and then realized I need to learn about Lyme disease, and then all of my sick mold Lyme patients were hypersensitive, and then I needed to learn about mast activation. And while I was going through all of this education, I would test myself too, because if I'm going to test my patients, I'm going to test myself. And it turned out that I had these terrible mold genes, the dreaded mold genes, that means that I can't process the mycotoxins immunologically very well. And then I was actually living in a moldy house, unbeknownst to me, getting more and more sick. And then, the light bulb started going off. Like, oh, that's why I get sick when I was in Oregon, because I was in a moldy office and I would get fatigue and depression and fibromyalgia type symptoms and insomnia. Um, and I had allergies too. I had allergies as a kid. And then as I was trying to treat myself for mold according to the Shoemaker protocol, I wasn't getting any better. And then I thought, okay, I really need to learn about Lyme disease, and tested myself. Sure enough, Lyme, Bartonella. And I remember my mom had gotten bit by a tick in upstate New York when she was like 8 or 9. And she didn't know what it was. So there's this huge tick, engorged with blood on her neck while she was at summer camp in the Adirondacks. And she was wearing turtlenecks because she was embarrassed and she didn't know what it was.
Oh, no. Poor thing.
Poor little mom. And yeah, sure enough, she probably gave me one of my sister's Lyme disease. Of course, I could have gotten bit by another tick too, because I grew up in the Adirondacks and went hiking and rock climbing and all sorts of things my entire early life. So now I had, figured out that I was living in a moldy house in California. I figured out that I had Lyme disease, and I was starting to have hypersensitivity reactions too because I was allergic as a kid. So now I'm having like hives and itching and lots of food sensitivities, which were being triggered by the mold exposure, most likely, and possibly Lyme and Bartonella. So, um, I really am very grateful that I had these experiences so that I could understand more about what patients were going through. Now, fortunately for me, I wasn't incredibly sick. Um, I could get by. I continued to work full time. I would just take extra naps on the weekends, and lots of supplements. But now I don't really feel like I have to treat mold or Lyme or Bartonella. I do take a antihistamine every day, and take a variety of different supplements. But pretty much, I'm doing really well. And managed to go through menopause without much hiccup either. So yes, I've had my own health experiences, and it really did help me have a lot more compassion and empathy for patients and what they're going through and how difficult it can be. I mean, I'm not incredibly restricted with my diet, but I do have to be careful. I'm gluten-free, dairy-free. Um, I have allergies to almonds, and me and tomatoes are not good friends either.
So, what was the greatest lesson that you took away from all of that? What was something that just really jumped out at you?
um, Always check your house for mold. I mean, really, the environmental triggers of mold in California are pretty horrible. Um, and I don't think that people understand how sick people can become from mold. I have a former patient who now lives in New Zealand who sent me a WhatsApp message that they just bought a house and they just found out that there was mold in it. And
Oh,
she has mast cell activation and mold sensitivity. And, and all of her New Zealand friends are like, "What? Mold's everywhere. It's a damn country." And she's like, "No, no, you don't understand." So it it can impact people all over the world, and it's very expensive to remediate. So
it
you know,
is.
so
It
expensive.
is. Yeah, many
So
people will say, "Oh, I'm treating the mold," or somebody's coming in and helping, but it has to be handled in a certain way in order to really safely get rid of it.
absolutely, you have to treat the house and you have to treat the patient or the person. And there's a lot of misinformation about out there about mold. Um, there's a lot of potentially well-meaning mold inspectors, but if they don't understand the relationship between how sick people can be from a minimal amount of mold, um, they are not going to be helpful. I am involved with a organization called the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness, ISEAI.org. And not only do they have provider uh, membership, they have an indoor environmental professional membership. And these are the specialists who will go in and look for mold, and they understand how sick people can be. Um, and with patients who are getting worse and worse and worse, or don't seem to be improving, I think the number one problem is that they're in a moldy environment.
And it makes it difficult. Like I had a client come to me and wanted to lose weight, wanted to build muscle, just be more fit. And she had mold exposure, two different occurrences in her home. And just really nothing could be addressed. The weight loss, the fitness level, nothing could be addressed until that issue was taken care of. And it took her quite a long time to get that under control. Like she did a protocol for quite a long time. And it was only then that her body would respond to these other things we were doing. So I wonder how many people that, like, let's say they're struggling with weight loss and weight loss resistant, and you wonder how many it's a consequence of toxicity in the body.
Yeah, you've hit on something that I think is really important, Carol. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we know when people are exposed to mold that some people just gain weight and they gain a lot
Mm-hmm.
of weight really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, they become leptin resistant, and it's not weight that you can just shed by changing your diet or increasing your exercise, because it's almost like a protective mechanism, right? So the body's really smart. I think that this is the thing that we also forget. The body's really smart. It says, okay, here's this poison. Where can I put this as
Oh,
that's
yeah.
going to be as safe as possible, right? It's stored in our fat cells,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's PCBs or old pesticides like DDT, flame retardants, mycotoxins, like it's stored in the fat cells. And then we go and we get some GLP-1 agonists and we, don't detox. And then what happens? The fat cells shrink and all the toxins then are floating around, impacting your organs, and you oftentimes don't feel well. And this is part of the reason why there's weight regain after you stop using the GLP 1s, or you might even have difficulty losing weight despite taking the GLP 1s, because there's a level of toxicity and exposure that's happening to that person that needs to be addressed first. Um, so yeah, it's a huge issue, and very few people are talking about it or acknowledging it. I mean, I love the GLP ones. I think they can be really helpful at resetting the metabolism. I prefer to use as small a dose as possible, but you have to clean up the body. You have to clean everything up first before the pathways of detoxification can work the way that they're supposed to.
So do you think that's the first step someone should take? I mean, obviously, nutrition is a big part of this movement and exercise, but should they first be looking at detoxification if a goal is significant weight loss?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just get so frustrated with these, pop-up clinics and the docs who the endocrinologists are like, "Here, yes, just go get your GLP-1 and lose the weight." And nobody's really looking at well, are you losing your muscle mass?
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing in-body scans and body composition assessment every month, and then really, really focusing on the detox. And I'm not saying like drink some lemon water. That's not going to cut it. Right? I mean, yes, that's helpful a little bit. It helps alkalinize the body, so you enhance the excretion of the fat soluble toxins in the toilet. But if you're serious about weight loss and want to lose 20, 40, 50 pounds, you absolutely have to focus on detox. And by that I mean um, things like sauna can be really helpful at excretion, so regular sauna practice. And then, depending upon the person and what their exposures are, they may even need to do coffee enemas and colonics. Oh my goodness, a medical doctor recommended colonics, but honestly, not to get the poop out, right? That's not the purpose. The purpose is to get the gallbladder to release the bile. A lot of the environmental chemicals are stored in the liver and the gallbladder, once they move from the fat cells, right, then they go into the liver to be processed, and they're hanging out in the gallbladder if you still have a gallbladder. And then what the coffee enemas and the colonics do is they enhance the gallbladder dumping. So there's a stimulus that feeds back to the gallbladder and says, okay, dump all this bile. Bile is really expensive for the body to make. So we have a system called the enterohepatic recirculation system that pulls the bile back up into the body so we don't have to make so much. Guess what? If we don't do things to either bind the toxins in the gastrointestinal tract or get more out than we can possibly recirculate, we're pulling all those toxins back in. So this is why the coffee enemas or the colonics can be really helpful, because then you get these bile dumps and you get a large amount of these chemicals out. And then that allows the body to release more chemicals from the fat cells, and then those can be excreted as well.
So what should people be looking at? Not just for weight loss, but should everybody be getting tested for these toxic substances? Should everybody be looking at, do I have lead exposure, mold exposure? Is that a first step for many people? Just get tested?
Those are great questions, Carol. I wish it was really straightforward to say everybody should be tested. I mean, probably every postmenopausal woman should be tested for lead, right? Because if you were a kid in the 70s, there was lead in gas and lead in paint, and therefore the lead got deposited in our bones when we were growing up. And so what happens now, whether you're on hormone replacement or not, but especially if you're losing bone, so you check your bone densities and your bone density is declining, the calcium and the other minerals that had safely kept the lead in the bones is now coming out, and the lead is coming out. I find the women with the highest lead levels, so the people with the highest lead levels in my practice are postmenopausal women and gun enthusiasts who go to shooting ranges, or cops, right, who are going to shooting ranges. Now, we have all new piping here in Southern California, so I don't see a lot of leaded pipes, depending upon where you are in the country. If there's lead in your pipes, I think lead levels should be checked in more people, because that would be a continuous source. The problem with a blood lead level is it only tells me current exposures. It does not tell me historical exposures. It does not tell me what's in your body. It only tells me what's coming out and circulating in your blood. So that is one of the challenges, because you can have a high lead burden at this moment in time. Perhaps you're premenopausal or perimenopausal and you haven't started losing bone yet. So we don't know what your lead burden is in your body. There's not great tests for that are easy to ask for from your regular doctor. Mercury is one that I would ask. These are whole blood lead and whole blood mercury. Don't do serum. And then mercury is really reflective of how much fish you eat. Unfortunately, fish is high mercury. The bigger the fish, the higher the mercury. And that's everywhere. Fish are very contaminated. And if they're freshwater fish, they may not have mercury, but they have a lot of other chemicals in them, because a lot of our lakes are polluted. So fish are not a great source of protein anymore. In terms of other chemicals in testing, Medicare covers one mycotoxin test. Mycotoxins are toxins produced by molds. So you could ask your Medicare provider, if you're on Medicare, to order a real-time lab mycotoxin test. It's unlikely, though, if they're not a functional doctor, that they will have an account and be able to order that test, but they could. Um, and it's not covered if you have a PPO or HMO insurance, and you'd have to pay out of pocket for that and find a provider who can order that test for you. And there aren't a lot of great other environmental chemical tests that are available. There are some available for the functional medicine world. So if you have a functional medicine provider, there are some. Some are kind of crappy. So it's hit or miss. I do some testing, but I'm more interested in like what's happening with the mitochondria, what's happening with oxidative stress, what's happening with inflammation. So we'll go back to the mast cells, right? So the mast cells release all these inflammatory mediators. In that local area, what is happening is there's what we call oxidative stress. This is where you have, this is why antioxidants are important, right? So oxidative stress is too much oxygen, not enough hydrogen. Antioxidants supply a hydrogen molecule to negate the oxidative stress. Oxidation is how we deal with toxins and infections. So the body upregulates the production of reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species to deal with that toxic threat. And then there's innocent bystanders, right? The tissues, the DNA, the cholesterol. If there's too much oxidation and not enough antioxidant to help mop up that oxidative stress, you're going to have a surplus of oxidation. Oxidation then leads to inflammation. Inflammation then leads to all sorts of issues. Where the issues show up depend on your bumpers. And, and honestly, I think where we need to do the internal work. So if people aren't speaking their truth and they're exposed to environmental chemicals, or have, mercury exposure, and then they're not speaking their truth, it impacts the thyroid. The body says, hey, there's a problem here. You're bumping into the walls. You're not speaking your truth. And now you have the opportunity to not only address the oxidative threat, the environmental chemicals, you can also now say, how is it that I could speak my truth? How is it that I could use my voice and heal my thyroid and connect my head and my heart and live, in sync with myself in a way that I haven't before, and actually really heal my thyroid physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually?
I went through yoga training years ago, the sacred hot yoga training, and that was one of the things they talked about the most was the poses in yoga that would help you open up typically through the throat and speak your truth. And for the listeners, when we're talking about speaking our truth, what are we referring to?
I think that we're taught in society that it's okay to hide, that it's okay to lie. How are you today, Carol? And you say, you're fine. Are you really fine? Well, of course, you may not be fine, but you're not necessarily going to tell me because, we're strangers. But are you at least being honest with your friends and your family? Are you being honest with yourself? Most importantly, are you really fine? Are you living your life of purpose? Do you jump out of bed every day and think, oh my God, I'm so grateful to be alive? Or do we wake up and think, oh shit, I've got, 15 things on my list of things to do and I don't ever think I'm going to get them done? And what's really true for you? Right? What is it that's your purpose here on the planet? If you believe in God, what's God's purpose for you? If you believe in the universe or spirit, what's spirit's purpose? If you don't believe in anything, you have a spirit, right? We know that there's a difference between a dead person and a live person, right? That's that spark. Are you living in alignment with that spark within you that is really why you're here on the planet and doing what you're supposed to be doing?
And it's not woo woo. I know some people think that all this is woo woo, and it really isn't. I think there is something to living out your truth, speaking your truth, because what I see women doing, it's getting less, I think, but we want to please. So we
Yes,
stifle it all down and kind of people please. I know I did that for decades. And in the process, we're kind of shrinking ourselves down to fit into somebody else's notion of what we
right,
should be.
right, right. And then what happens when you shrink yourself down? What happens when you people please? Your immune system gets these mistaken signals, right? Or maybe they're not mistaken. Maybe they're like, hey, Carol, wake up, shine your light, be yourself, stop shrinking. That's not what you're here to do. You are here to be the best version of yourself on the planet. And by decades of not speaking your truth, of shrinking, what happened to your immune system? What happened to your body?
It's like we're afraid to take up that space. And I see this too as we age. This is another category. There's what women do. And now being in my mid 60s, there's what we do as we age. Again, as women, it's like you feel like you need to shrink yourself down. And I remember I got this just very good blog from someone I follow that has it's like an online magazine for women 60 plus. And she was saying, stop shrinking yourself down. Don't be afraid to take up space. You're here for a reason. So I love this conversation. I think it's so important for us to have.
It is. It is. It is the most important thing, right? Yes, I'm a medical doctor and I take care of bodies. But as we've talked about, like the body isn't separate from the spirit. The body isn't separate from the emotions. The body isn't separate from our thoughts. It can't be, right? We're not built that way. We're built to be integrated. And our purpose is to use the feedback that we're getting from our bodies that says, things don't feel right, and say, okay, what am I doing that is not in alignment with my purpose and my joy? I mean, who doesn't want more joy and love in their lives,
Yes, joy.
right?
That's a big one. That's a
It's a
big
big
one.
one. It's a big one. And we've sacrificed our joy, right? If we think about it
Mm.
that way, how sad is it that we're taught that we should sacrifice our joy?
And
Ugh,
it's a choice too. Like I choose joy. Like make that choice and then don't feel guilty about it. Because I think women do. We feel guilty once again for taking up that space, for wanting to have joy, for wanting to have something more.
right. And it's it's not even more. It's like what you're meant to do is to
Mm,
be joy, to be love, right?
yes, absolutely. Dr. McCann, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been great. As we wrap up, any wisdom for the listeners, anything that we didn't cover that you think would be relevant for them to know?
Yes, a couple things. Um, I did want to let your listeners know that this these ideas actually have a name, and I'm calling it the Unforgetting Project.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Unforgetting project. Beautiful.
So I think the important thing is no matter where you are in your journey, whether you feel pretty robust and are just, optimizing, want to live a long, healthy life, or you're really struggling, know that that spark inside of you, that sense of hope that keeps you driving towards something better, is really worth honoring and really worth nurturing. And that your purpose is to be joy, to be love. And if you keep listening to that spark and hold hope in your heart, that you will get there.
So good. Thank you so much, Dr. McCann. And how can listeners follow you, follow your work, get a hold of you?
Yes, thank you. I have a brick and mortar practice in Southern California called thespringcenter.com. You can find me there. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, soon to be TikTok, at Dr. at
I'm
Dr.
laughing
Kelly
because
McCann.
I'm not on TikTok.
I'm not on, no, but I just hired a new social media guy and he's like, oh, you gotta be
Oh.
on TikTok. Okay. At Dr. Kelly McCann. You can find me
Mhm.
there. And look for the Unforgetting project. I'm working on a logo and a website, and we're going to start a program in the spring, hopefully in January, maybe a
Exciting.
little bit later, on kind of more about delving into these ideas.
Love this. I'm definitely going to be following you because I want to see how this project emerges and find out more. So I encourage the listeners to do the same. And I'm not on TikTok yet. A little bit afraid of it for some reason. I don't know what that is, but
Me too. I'm with you, Carol. So maybe I'll see you on TikTok.
maybe. Yes. Thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate your wisdom and how much you've just shared with us. So thank you.
You're welcome, Carol. So happy to be here. Bye, everyone.
And yes, and to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.